Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I'm Angelia, and today I have Friday Reads. It's kind of a small Friday Reads. I didn't really notice this until it got to the end of the week, but I really only read one book, and I didn't really lack reading time. I think I just read slowly, and it's fine because I'm really happy with the book that I read, which I will talk about in just a minute. And then I will also share with you the book that I just started reading, but I have only read a few pages, so I don't have a whole lot to say about that yet. I also don't have really anything at all to say about TV shows because we are still kind of in a viewing slump. I don't really have reading slumps, but I definitely have viewing slumps. And we're dipping in and out of a lot of different shows. So once we settle on something and decide to stick with it for a while, I will report back. So I'm going to talk about my reading. But before that, this is officially the opening of my holiday season on YouTube. I am decking the halls this weekend. I've already kind of started decorating in this room. I've started shopping a little bit. I have just held on by my fingernails not to start too soon, but I am releasing the Christmas kraken, you know, whatever that thing is, and it is beginning. I am wearing a Christmas shirt for this video, and just like the Who's down in Whoville singing, it's gonna start low and then it's gonna start to grow. On that note, I have a little holiday game that maybe you will play with me. I hope you will. But I have these Christmas cards. It's called Christmas Card Game. And they're supposed to be conversational prompts. And I gave these to my daughter like a couple years ago. And you can see she was real into it because it's still here at my house. But I thought that maybe it would be fun if every time I did a video over the next month or so, I pulled a card and try to answer it. And then if you will also answer it down in the comments below, we can have a little Christmas conversation like it's supposed to be. Now, if I do this and it's like sound of crickets in the comments, I'll know y'all weren't into it, just like Emma Grace wasn't, but we shall see. Okay, I'm mixing up the cards. And as you can see, I'm not cheating. I'm mixing the cards and I'm going to pull a random card out of the middle of the pile. And it says, when do you start getting excited for Christmas? Shortly before Halloween. Sometimes it varies. I mean, sometimes really when it rolls into November, that's when it starts. But it kind of came early this year. And so instead of starting at the beginning of November and then growing as we get up to Thanksgiving, it kind of started back before Halloween. And then once we got into November, it was like just sort of bursting out all over. All right, so you can answer in the comments below, when do you start getting excited for Christmas if you do celebrate Christmas? Okay, now the book that I want to talk about was The Age of Innocence, and I put in my thumbnail, I put a picture of another cover because mine has no cover. I got it secondhand, and I got it from this weird place that I've talked about before that is like a U-Haul rental place that also sells used books. And for some reason, this dude, he cuts like the thing that would have been inside the cover and he tapes it in the book. So this is a Barnes & Noble edition, and he marked it $1.99. But it is in good condition, and I have not read The Age of Innocence in many, many years. And I did go on this big Edith Wharton tear, like back in my 20s, and I read a lot of her books, and I have some of them. Some I am still trying to get copies of, but I'm now like starting to go back through them. And this was just absolutely fantastic. It did not, every now and then when you go back and reread, it's not quite the way you felt when you read it before, but this one was so good. And Edith Wharton wrote this book. She was writing it around 1919, and then it was published, and it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1921, and she was the first woman to win the Pulitzer. There was controversy about this award, And I'm not going to try to explain it because I am not the Pulitzer expert. But if you want to know about it after seeing this video, and you can Google it and read some articles about it. She wrote it, as I said, in around 1919, just at the end of World War One. Only, of course, they did not know at that time that it was World War One. They just thought it was, the Great War. And but it is set in the 1870s. And there is a little piece at the end of the book that comes forward in time to around the turn of the century, like about 25, 30 years after the original events. And in that small part at the end, the main character does reflect upon some of the differences and the changes that have occurred and how they have provided a different living experience for his children. But I digress. It's hard to talk about this book. I say this every time. It's hard to talk about every book without spoilers. But The Age of Innocence is just, I think the reason why I read it so slowly was that I kept stopping and going back over scenes and conversations that were just so beautifully nuanced. Basically, to boil it way down, there is a bit of a love triangle because we have a young man named Newland Archer who is part of old New York. There's many, many wonderful scenes of dinners and parties and men sitting around in the drawing room and everything to describe this time period and the way everything looked. But there's this whole set of people in New York, and they are so rigid in their dress, the appropriate conversation, the where people should sit in a room. Every single thing has written and unwritten rules for what men should do, what women should do. And also it's I thought it's very interesting. There's several conversations in the book about New York being kind of, I don't know, it almost has like almost a small town feel. Like they talk about how there's no culture here, there's no art. You have to go to Paris and all these other places if you want to know what the latest styles are, or you want to really know about art and literature and culture. And Newland receives his books from London and things like that. So just the idea of New York being kind of small and limited and behind the times is kind of a funny concept now. But anyway, I'm describing this in a convoluted fashion. But anyway, so we have Newland, who's a young man who has recently been engaged to be married to May Welland, who is a beautiful, young, accomplished woman, very outdoorsy, healthy, active. She's not very intellectual or cerebral, and Archer lives like entirely in his mind. He fancies himself to be smarter and more cultured and more literate and more thoughtful than everybody around him. And he's well traveled, he's very wealthy, he is technically a lawyer, but really he even admits that there's like this whole class of young men who kind of just sit around and work a few hours a day and they don't really do a whole heck of a lot, but they have to have a profession. And so that's what he does. He lives with his mother and his unmarried sister. And he spends a lot of time just observing and judging everybody else in his set of people while he himself is also behaving in accordance to the guidelines that he feels that he's chafing against. He wonders if his lovely fiance is going to be a good match for him because married people don't ever really know each other until it's too late. He doesn't know if she'll really be the kind of partner that he dreams of, but he can only hope. And so into this scenario comes Ellen Olenska, who has left her abusive European husband and come back to New York to live with relatives. And it is a scandal. First of all, they do everything, kind of like in a big blob. So as a blob, they decide to reject and shun her. And then, some behind the scenes mechanics occur. And then as a blob, they all decide they're going to accept her and have a party with her. But they don't know what to do about this woman who's not particularly interested in following the rules and guidelines. She speaks more frankly than everyone else. She wears her clothing differently. She is has no intention of going back to her husband. She's seeking a divorce, and Newland is mesmerized. He falls in love with her, and truthfully, they don't know each other very much either, but he is absolutely enchanted and really turned on by this woman who is actually living outside the box a little bit, and the way that he is kind of fantasizes about. So as the story goes on, there's a number of tense situations where Newland is grappling about his commitment to be married to May versus his desire for Ellen. And there are several really, really fantastic scenes. A lot of this book is about what people think and don't say, or what people say that they only say a little bit and there's so much behind it. They even talk in the book about how the whole society is like functioning through hieroglyphics. It's just a lot of very, very subtle stuff that both constrains people and also, in a novel is just really fantastic to read and see how much communication that she's able to get out of like virtually no communication. So I will not spoil, in case you have not read it, what turns out to happen with these people. But I will say that Newland Archer, Wharton has created a very a difficult character here, where you can sympathize with his feeling of being stifled in the society, but at the same time you can see that he is totally hypocritical. He benefits from this every day. He over and over again chooses, when he tries to go up against these constraints and starts to step out of the boundaries a little, and he looks around and he sees that people are a little bit startled by what he has started to say or do, he retreats again and again into the comfort and the security of the system that he lives in. And will he eventually do anything really bold and escapist or not? I'm not going to give it away. But I will also say that I found the women to be fascinating characters, and she chooses to tell the story through Newland. So we're kind of stuck with his point of view and how much access he gets into the other people's minds. But I think to hear more of Ellen's story and even more of May's story would just be so fantastic. I think May in particular, because Ellen, we kind of get a pretty good sense of what has happened to her and what she's dealing with. But May is more mysterious, and she really Newland's pretty unfair to her in this story because he chooses her uh, and proposes to her based on her charm and beauty, but then he is almost instantly frustrated by the fact that she stays so firmly in her lane. She won't say anything inappropriate. She won't do anything unexpected. She won't go up against her parents' expectations. And so he just kind of writes her off as being limited and not super bright. But there's a few scenes in the book where it's quite clear that May knows exactly what's going on, and she is more stuck than anybody else because of her circumstances. There is a lot more to her than what Newland has prescribed to her. So it's all very interesting in that regard. And even some of the minor characters, like her grandmother, really, there's a scene there too where you know that she knows exactly what is going on in this storyline, and without saying anything specific about any of it, Newland knows it too. And so there's just some like fabulous dialogue, beautiful descriptions. It's just it's just great. So I spent a very luxurious week taking my time and just reading back and forth over the pages of this book. All right, then I just started this today, so I have read like 20 pages, but I have started on the Sleeping Car Porter. So I'm moving forward in time to 1929. I'm not going to talk about it because I just began. A lot of people are aware this book just won the Giller Prize in Canada. I'm very excited. It has a beautiful cover, and it only came in paperback, but the pages are like really nice. There's like, the paper is textured and it just has a really nice high quality feel. And so that's all I have to say about that until next week. All right, so I'm going to stop there. But The Age of Innocence, A Beautiful Tale of Old New York. I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. Please let me know in the comments what you are going to read this weekend or something great you just finished. Feel free to answer my Christmas question. And I hope that you are having a great time. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.